Political crisis in Italy as the Prime Minister announces his resignation. What happens next? Hello, I'm Nathan King filling in for Anna Naidu, and this is The Heat. Hello again. Less than 50 months after a new Italian government led by the populist Five-Star Movement and the far-right League Party was sworn in, the country is caught in a political crisis. Last year, the League's party's leader, Matteo Salvini, became a deputy prime minister and interior minister too. A hardliner on issues like migration, he has fought to stop migrants rescued at sea from entering the country. Meanwhile, his party has surged in the opinion polls, and earlier this month he called for a new election after accusing his coalition partners of incompetence. Then last Tuesday, the government collapsed with Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte announcing his resignation. He lashed out at Salvini, accusing him of being an opportunist who wants more power.
Caro Matteo, promoting this government crisis, you have taken on a big responsibility towards the country. I heard you calling for full powers to govern the country and invoke demonstrations in the piazzas to support you.
But Salvini hit back hard at Conte.
What we take away from today was a speech made by the Prime Minister of insults to a political force that represents millions of Italians.
The Italian president has a key role in determining where the crisis goes from here. He has given the parties a few more days to try and put together a new government. If that fails, Italy will likely face new elections. There is so much to discuss. So let's hear from our panel. Joining me now via Skype from Verona is Paolo Borchia. He is a member of European Parliament representing Italy's Lega Nord party. With me here in the studio is Giovanna De Maio. She is a visiting fellow at the Brookings Institution. And from Hamburg, Germany, we are joined by Christian Blasberg. He is a lecturer in history and European politics at Luis Guido Carli University. Welcome to all of you in the show. Paolo, I want to get to you first, obviously in the hot seat as a member of the League. What exactly is the problem and how did we get here?
Well, basically we faced several problems in the last period with Five Stars movement. Basic matter was that for the first months we were able, on the basis of the so-called contract, we were able to reach some good results, in my opinion, but in the last period, especially starting from the European elections campaign, we faced new problems, and as we received some clear tasks by our electors, now we find it very difficult to explain to our electors why it is impossible to get the reform of the state, giving more autonomy to regions. And then another key problem is represented by the infrastructure development of Italy. And notably after European elections, we took into account that something in the Five Stars movement changed. They supported the candidature of Mrs. von der Leyen to the presidency of the European Commission, and so, in my opinion, this was very unfair for the electors because the Five Stars movement had a quite critical program towards European Union, and so they, in my opinion, they cheated their campaign.
One thing you didn't mention there is that you looked at the polls, which saw a bump for you up to 40%. Is this political opportunism, and you think you can get more power by calling for a snap election or reorganising the government? Just a quick follow-up.
You know, polls are polls and elections are elections. Traditionally, I don't love to trust too much in polls. The reality is that I have the impression that all the good reforms that we could do, we were able to do it. But now it isn't over. We have other goals. We would like to complete the program of the contract, but we are not able for the Five Stars movement position.
Giovanna here in the studio. Can you respond to that? Is it all about policy? It doesn't seem like it when you read the headlines.
Definitely it's about policy, and of course between Five Star Movement and the League there has been quite a few disagreements. Yet it is very interesting to see that this split comes from the League side on a vote in which the League had actually vote like that on a resolution that had passed. So the League agreed on that, and basically the League won in this vote on August 8th. So it's interesting to see that this the government didn't fail on a split that caused harm to the League, but the League took advantage from it.
So why are they taking advantage now? Because they think
no, because this resolution that was about a high-speed train infrastructure connecting the city of Turin in Italy to the one in Lyon in France, and basically Five Star Movement voted contrary to this resolution, whereas the League voted for, and the overall parliament voted for it. So the League won in this specific setting.
Right.
But afterwards, Salvini decided to trigger the government crisis, claiming that there was no more agreement with Five Star, which was true. But Salvini knew about it from the very beginning, because this was a very loud issue that Five Star Movement had opposed for a long time. So this was not news.
So, Giovanna, it's going to be interesting to see what Salvini wants. This is what he's kind of saying he wants for the future.
Now in Italy, I want a government that will give back to the Italian people the pride to be Italian citizens, free and sovereign, master of their land, their sea, and their life.
So, Christian in Hamburg, what do you make of this sort of populist message from essentially one of the most popular parties in Italy and deeply Eurosceptic?
Well, the message that Salvini has brought through is most of all one thing that also Prime Minister Conte has said: I want power, give me all the power. And this is something that maybe has frightened people a little bit and has also shook the political establishment in Italy. Because it seems to be some kind of conception of politics that goes around the other institutions, that says, okay, there is a direct contact between the people and the Prime Minister and those who govern actually, and the other institutions, which means the Parliament and also the President of the Republic, should not be considered by this. And well, we have been talking a lot about direct democracy in the last years. And this is something that actually has shook people a little bit, and has maybe also woken up the other political forces to say, okay, we have to work together to avoid that this actually happens.
Yeah, it's interesting to say that. Let me play another piece of sound from Salvini that really speaks to this sort of European-wide effect of the political moves in Italy. And also, I saw both of our guests shaking and nodding their heads, so I'm going to get their reaction off the back of this. Let's take a listen.
It is not only the Lega that is first in Italy. Marine Le Pen has the first party in France. Nigel Farage has the first party in Britain. So, Italy, France, Great Britain. It is the sign of a Europe that is changing, of a Europe tired of the powers of the elites, finance, multinationals, and from tomorrow we will have to redouble our efforts.
So, Paolo in Verona, you were shaking your head at our previous guest, but taken in the European context, this does look like a sort of push by the right-wing parties to have more of a say when it comes to the running of the European Union.
Well, first of all, just allow me to clarify. Then when Matteo Salvini was asking for powers, he was clearly talking about full powers, but according to the Italian constitution. So we are not talking about nothing special. Mm-hmm. And then, I disagree when I hear that the first speech was a populist speech, because I think that calling for elections is a symbol of democracy and not of populism. So sorry to interrupt, Paolo. Even after just
just over 14 months of a new government, it's okay to go back to the party, to the people when you see your poll numbers change?
Well, no, I think that people used to go to elections for voting governments, and they give tasks to governments, and so people's expectations are high in this moment because it's a crucial historical moment in Italy and in Europe as well. If the government is not able to give to citizens some clear replies, it doesn't make sense to have a government that is not able to give development, and that's it.
Giovanna, can you pick up on that? Because obviously there's a lot of European implications here. Italy has to pass a budget as well, right? Which may fall below the European Union requirements, but there's a lot of interesting things going on in Europe. I don't have to mention Brexit on October the 31st. Elections could fall around that time. Also, Germany seems to be entering into a recession. That's interesting, considering what's going on. Just tell us what's going on here.
Yeah, so it's true that democracy works through elections, so in which people vote for their representatives. At the same time, Italian people voted last year and gave the trust to this government.
Right, just 14 months ago.
14 months ago. And it is very irresponsible, in my opinion, to trigger a government crisis in a moment in which Italy has to pass the budget law that needs to be completed before December. And the numbers aren't particularly great for Italian growth, for Italian employment, and also for the deficit GDP ratio that is above 2%. That was the agreement that has been made between Italy and the European Union.
By the way, Paolo's shaking his head to all this, so,
Okay,
so carry on. But I just want
to
let you know that...
welcome to react. At the same time, it's a very crucial moment, as he was saying, on this for Italian politics and economics, and it's important for Italy in its European projection to have stability, and also in light of the G7 that is happening pretty soon. So having a consistent foreign policy that would be able, as Paolo was mentioning, to change Europe, but in a way that is done through democratic tools, and at the same time increasing the leverage of Italy in the European institution instead of reducing it. Just final thought.
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to follow up, yeah.
Yeah, with the results of the European election, neither the League or Five Star Movement, which were the parties composing the government majority, are part of any party family in the European Union that govern the European Union in practice. So this translated, in my opinion, into less leverage of Italy in the European Parliament setting.
Well, funny you should say that, because also I want to speak to you about the fact that going forward, of course, Italy may not go to elections because there's all this horse trading right now behind the scenes. What do you think is the most likely scenario, Giovanna, going forward? I mean, do you see that we're going to have a change of government? Could we see the League and Five Star somehow make it up? Silvio Berlusconi, the former Prime Minister, is in the mix. I mean, this is exciting when it comes to politics.
Italian politics is always exciting, in my opinion, and there's a lot of changes, and everything can happen. Yes. So from the cards on the table that I see, to my knowledge, it doesn't look like Five Star Movement and the League can be able to mend things and to go ahead together. The option that seems more feasible right now is an agreement between Five Star Movement and the Democratic Party.
That's the left of centre
party.
Yes,
the centre left, the Democratic Party. The centre left, though, has two different streams inside of it. So one is revolving around former Prime Minister Matteo Renzi, and the other one is loyal to the Secretary of the centre left, of the Democratic Party, who is Luca Zingaretti. So these two, Nicola Zingaretti. Right. Those two people have two different ways of looking at the future of the Democratic Party. So the most likely scenario to me would be an agreement between Five Star Movement and the Democratic Party. Yet the question is how long it will last.
And that would please Brussels too, wouldn't it?
This would
I mean, it would reflect kind of where the European Union wanted to go.
Yes, the centre left has always had very pro-European stances, and between the points that Nicola Zingaretti mentioned, there was a very strong position towards the EU in the sense of dialogue and more social equality and addressing social inequalities actually through EU tools and settings. So this would please the EU. At the same time, I worry that probably in a year, Italy will go back to elections because of disagreement within the centre-left, and this would cause more instability.
Also, in Italy, there's a populist movement. I mean, Paolo, I'm going to bring you in here again. We've seen some really iconic images of Matteo Salvini this summer, enjoying, like most Italians do, a trip to the beach in his bathing suit and connecting sort of with the common man. But also what he says, especially not just in the north where the League's support started from, but in the south in terms of immigration and stopping migrant boats and the like, has really struck a chord with a lot of people in the south. Do you think that the League, if it comes to elections, can actually improve their standing?
Well, why not? I found very funny when I saw during this summer Matteo Salvini went to the beach, I think, a couple of days, and many cameras was there, and so national televisions get the impression that he spent all his summer at the seaside. But by the way, I just would like to...
As is every Italian's right. It's beautiful weather, you have beautiful beaches, why not? That's what I'd say.
Yes, we should be happy for that. But I would like to just to underline one point on the budget law. Well, if the President of the Republic will call for elections, there is all the time for voting a new budget law. We should take into account that last year the budget law was voted on the 30th of December. So, well, now we are in August, and I think that we have all the time for making a good job on budget.
Okay. Christian, can you respond to Paolo's sort of comments about where the League stands in terms of Europe and where Europe would like things to go? Obviously, Italy is a democratic country, so they're not going to sort of interfere. But you can see some sort of white knuckles in Brussels while this happens.
Well, I think Brussels, first of all, has to remain neutral and has not to interfere, because interference in the internal affairs of another country is always gives a very bad taste. That's one thing. The other thing, of course, what we have seen in these last month, the politics towards Europe made by this government has been felt like a kind of provocation. I think that Matteo Salvini tried to provoke the European Union. He knows that Italy has the way to blackmail Europe, and he tried to do this. But we don't have to forget also the Five-Star Movement was joining in this attempt. So it was not only Salvini who was doing it, it was also the Five-Star Movement, especially talking about the budget, for example. The budget negotiation, in the very end they gave in, yes, but in the very end also the European Union had to give in, and this means that Italy had to, has shown that it has a certain way. I believe that Italy, or let's say the Lega most of all, but to a certain extent also the Five Stars, try to pursue a policy towards Europe which in the very end blackmails the Union and might also provoke the Union in the very end to expel a country like Italy. This is something that never happened before. So this is not like a Brexit or Italexit or whatever kind of exit. It is actually the European Union itself which is forced in the very end to provide against the country with the very last solution of an exit of this country. So this is something that I believe this government tried to pursue and which is well remembered. So in Europe, I believe that everyone will be satisfied now if a different government comes into place.
Christian, that's kind of strong language. Paolo, can you respond? You know, expelling Italy from Europe, given the fact that one country is leaving Europe, the UK, this is dangerous talk, isn't it? I mean, but is that a scenario if Lega policies are followed?
Well, I spent the last 10 years of my career working in the European Parliament as a political advisor, and I was elected three months ago. So I can tell you that I have always noticed a sort of prejudice of European institutions towards some movements like Lega that are proposing a reform of the European Union. But during my electoral campaign, I always talked about a principle of subsidiarity and proportionality. Those principles are foreseen by treaties of the European Union, so we are talking about something foreseen by the law ruling the European Parliament, the European Commission, and the Council. So sometimes I think that the matter starts from Brussels and not from national states, because I repeat, in my opinion, there is a prejudice that makes the dialogue very hard. And then concerning budget dynamic, I think that Lega was not so happy to spend a lot of public money, because in the last 25 years we were used to rule the most important and the richest regions in northern Italy, and so I think that Lega has shown to be reliable, because on the economic point of view we gave some good results in those regions, and so I don't see any reasons for seeing Matteo Salvini's words like a provocation for the European Union.
Giovanna, can you just respond to that? Is there a risk of Italy coming out of the European Union? And I just want you to fold in sort of the disconnect between Italy and the Lega's support for sort of anti-immigration measures and where the European Union is. That is a big source of tension too, not just the fiscal responsibility of Italy as well.
Sure. I would like to say that, of course, I don't think prejudice comes by itself. Of course, the League's approach towards the European Union, that has always been hyperly critical and also controversial and confrontational, of course, triggers some sort of judgment from the other partners. As far as immigration, it's true, it's a big problem, and the EU hasn't shown solidarity on that point. So Italian government has always been, first of all, trying to save migrants at sea before this current government took office, and as always tried to negotiate better opportunities for burden sharing in the European Union. Yet this has never found any concrete solution on the European Union level, and Salvini's approach of preventing harboring for NGO ships to the Italian ports, I believe, has been also detrimental for Italy's negotiation power within the EU, because it's true that a strong approach can actually get immediate result in the very short term.
More money and more attention.
More attention, for sure. At the same time, this is a matter of how you address humanitarian crisis and how you treat other human beings. And I believe that this strong and confrontational approach does not do any good to the way Italy makes its case.
But is it popular? Because it's interesting. I've been reading a lot of Italian headlines recently, listening to opinions, and especially in the south of Italy, this seems to be much more popular than people thought. This sort of stopping the boats,
yes.
Going against the sort of German policy of bringing people in and bringing them into society. This seems to be very popular indeed.
I believe that immigration is a matter of perception. So, of course, if in the news there is always a lot of a certain way of describing the immigration crisis as an invasion, as part of Salvini's message come out in Twitter or Facebook, I believe it's a popular issue that has particularly felt in the south of Italy, which is more exposed to immigration. Yet, if you look at polls on the national level, immigration is considered between the main threats to national security. Yet, if you look at polls on local levels, immigration is only listed like for fourth or fifth as priority in national security. It means that on a local level, there is not a big perception of immigration and threat from immigration. At the same time, I believe the showing force and in identifying an enemy that can be easy to blame for the loss of jobs and unemployment, it's a very powerful narrative that, of course, gets a lot of consensus.
Okay, I understand. Polls are going to be different in Siena than they are in Sicily. I totally get that.
No,
But
I meant on the national level versus local level. So in Siena and Sicily might be the same, but it can be like it's a different perception of immigration. Less dangerous on local level and more dangerous on a national level.
Interesting. So what you're crying here is, I mean, you're not saying it, but sort of fake news. I mean,
No,
you know, I mean, we have the same debate here in terms of whipping up anti-immigration feeling in the media and the political classes as well. Christian, also, there's been accusations about that in the UK. Are you seeing this whole Italian situation in a European perspective? And there's been a lot of talk by allies in the US here, like Steve Bannon, the former advisor to Donald Trump, who's been in Europe and has had conversations with the League, depending who you believe, how deep. Do you see this as a push by the global right?
Well, this is an attempt, but if we look on what actually Steve Bannon has achieved in Europe, it's not very much. It is a kind of think tank what he was establishing
the movement,
in Europe,
the
especially
yes.
also in Italy, because close to, a movement, and he acquired this kind of monastery close to Rome, where he made, let's say, a kind of a seed or thinking basis for this. For this movement. But in the very end, I believe that the forces that he wants to unite and he wants to coordinate want to pursue most of all their national politics. It's not for nothing that they call themselves sovranists or sovranisti. Sovranisti means I'm doing most of all things for my country, inside of my country, with forces out of my country, and I don't care for others. Now, Bannon is coming from the US. He has close ties to the Italy first, or if you take the Front National, it's France first. If you take Vox, it's Spain first. So you can go across Europe and make the same phrase for every country, basically. So it's hard to get them together because the national interest and what they perceive as national interest is very different from one country to another.
Paolo, last word. Has the experiment with the League failed in Italy, or are you going to be back to fight another day through elections or another coalition?
No, well, I think I'm very realistic, and I think that now Matteo Salvini and Lega are introducing in concrete facts people's expectations. So I'm quite optimistic. Let's see what will go on with government, but I repeat, I'm optimistic. I would like to have, if possible, a step back on migration issue, because I'm not sharing the view expressed by your guests. I mean, I spent many years of my life in a factory when I was a student, and I worked with people coming from different countries, and I never think that they were my enemies or they were stealing our jobs. So this is another prejudice that we should try to correct. And some figures, more than 90% of asylum seekers' requests for protections in Italy were rejected, and so it means that these people are migrants, but they are not escaping from some conflict situations. And so in this case, it's clear that it's not an emergency, but Italy lived this situation as an emergency, because it's clear that it's not possible to move thousands and thousands of people on Italian coast without consequences. And then concerning the perception on crimes, well, just we should take into account that 35% of people jailed in Italian prisons are of foreign origins. So we should try to improve something on this side concerning integration. Thank you.
Well, some controversial last comments there from the gentleman.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're going to have to leave it there, but obviously lots more to discuss, and you can tell from the differences opinions here about Italy and Europe's future that this will continue. From the gentleman in Verona, Paolo, thank you very much. To our guest in Hamburg, thank you very much. And Giovanna here in the studio, that's all we have time for. We're going to have to leave it there. Have a great weekend, and thanks for joining us.